So one World Bank estimate early in the pandemic said that there would be 100 million people thrown into poverty as a consequence of the lockdowns. Poverty meaning like less than $2 a day of income. Now, why might that be? Well, for the last 20 some years, maybe even longer, we've had this globalization of the world economy. Our economic systems are interconnected with each other. Poor countries reorganized their economy so they would fit in. And when overnight those connections were severed or greatly disrupted, supply chains disrupted, what it did is it threw a lot of people who were like headed toward the middle class within the poor countries into poverty, dire poverty. We'd lifted 1 billion people out of poverty over the last 20 some years. A great success, a sort of unheralded success, but the progress on that has been halted the last 2 years, and 100 million people are poor that otherwise wouldn't have been absent these lockdowns. The consequences of that on health have been devastating. So tens of millions of people are starving as a consequence of these lockdowns. The UN put an estimate out in March of 2021 that in South Asia alone, almost 230,000 children had died from starvation as a consequence of the lockdowns. The stress that the lockdowns have placed on the poor, living everywhere around the world, have been enormous. I don't believe that there's a single poor person on the face of the earth that has not been harmed by these lockdowns.
We live in an era of censorship and disinformation, and it can be really hard to know what's true and what's false in this information climate. To get honest information and insights you can trust, join us on Epoch TV. You can sign up for your 14-day free trial at ept.ms/freetrialjan. That's ept.ms/freetrialjan.
I mean, it.
We have to laugh because it's so sad. I mean, this is why I believe it's one of the biggest public health. This is the biggest public health error in history.
Okay, well, because it seems to me, okay, the reason I responded the way I did, I'm also aware that apparently the wealth of the sort of, some of the most affluent people in the world increased dramatically. I mean, by trillions, in fact, right? So that's another piece of the puzzle. And then you're saying, that the laptop class, so to speak, got this focused protection as a result of the policy, also while kind of feeling like they're kind of more, or even being told that they're kind of morally on the right side of things here, right? Because we're doing our part to stop the spread and so forth. So
it's a direct moral inversion of the truth, right? So it wasn't immoral for a poor person to go work to feed their families, then get COVID. We created this sense of shame around getting COVID just as a result of like people doing normal things that they need to do in order to keep their lives going. That was wrong, right? That was a huge part of the public health disaster, this moralization of COVID. And you touched on it, Jan. It's really, what you said is incredibly important. We made poor people to feel like they were doing bad illicit things because they weren't staying home, staying safe. How could they? They don't have the economic circumstances to do that. And we made rich people feel like they were good people just because they had the economic wherewithal to stay home, stay safe. It made no sense. From a public health point of view, it's a disaster. From an economic point of view, this is the single biggest driver. If I can point to it, one health policy, or one economic policy that driving inequality. This is the single biggest driver of inequality I've ever seen in my lifetime from a single policy.
And you've been looking at this for some time.
I do research on socioeconomic status and health.
It seems like we're emerging out of this. I mean, there's all sorts of indicators of this sort of people that were, arguably strong lockdown proponents backpedaling, saying, what are lockdowns actually? These kinds of things. I'm seeing a lot of that. I take that in a sense as actually positive, because it seems like, I think one of your stated goals at the moment is to make sure that lockdowns, however they manifest, never happen again, or that this isn't considered as a possible policy.
I would like lockdowns to become a dirty word. That's my goal. As I want, when people think about lockdowns, I want them to think of them in horror. That suite of policies, this aim of keeping society, stopping society functioning, as a way to stop infectious disease, we should think of as like almost the same way we think of like medieval torture instruments. They were a catastrophic mistake, and so that is my goal, is to like help people understand how catastrophic a mistake they were, so that next time when an infectious disease comes up, when we get an epidemic, we don't jump to lockdowns as the obvious strategy. We at the very least think 15 times before we launch ourselves into them.